So this is a special bonus for the now New Original Works Festival. As Diana kept saying, this is George's baby. So I would love to introduce you to George Lugg, and you are the Associate Director of REDCAT.
Yes, I am. REDCAT, the Roy and Edna Disney CalArts Theater.
Wonderful. Can you give a little introduction to yourself and your role at REDCAT typically, and then how the Now Festival is your baby?
Well, I do a number of things. As the Associate Director, I oversee the implementation of a lot of programs, kind of across the disciplines, and play a curatorial role in conversation with the Executive Director around dance and theater. But the programs for the development of new work by Los Angeles-based artists, I oversee those completely. So they have different kinds of processes, which we have a studio series, which is for shorter works, more informal, where we invite guest curators to come in and co-curate with me those programs, which we do 3 times a year. And those are for works under 15 minutes and just one night, not a lot of tech. And then every year we do the New Original Works Festival, which is like the next step, possibly, or for artists. It's a very work in progress, and then these next kind of launching new works. And for that we invite proposals from artists about usually end of January to ask them what their next project is and what they would like to do. And internally with the team we review all of those, and in consultation with other people in the field put together the final program. And that's what is happening now over the next 3 weeks, or, well, last week, this week, next week. We're jumping in the middle.
And do you, if you audition in January, because obviously as a Los Angeles artist, these have always been on my radar, and I don't think I've applied, but but I've always wanted to. Have you ever had somebody audition and you've chosen a piece, and then they're like, this is no longer a piece I'm interested in, or for whatever reason?
Well, with this program, there is no audition. It's a proposal and previous work samples, and then we get on board and we see where people go. And that's part of the risk and excitement, because it really is inviting people to sometimes move in new directions, try new, experiment with new ideas, and that is always the most rewarding part when it really takes off. And some things, I think of this as research and development, and I think that no one questions what goes on in a lab in terms of trying to figure out, well, everything has to be like the most perfect success and marketable. No, it's like creating a space in which experimentation can happen, and people can sort of go as far as they need to go to really explore where they're at with this project.
Why do you think the studio and the Now project, the festivals, that these series are important for Los Angeles to see?
Oh, for audiences? Well, I think for audiences they're an amazing chance to see a survey of work. These are shared programs, so it's not discipline specific, and most of the artists are working kind of at the edges of their disciplines or crossing disciplines. So it's very exploratory, and it's a chance to come see, something you wouldn't have expected. Maybe you're interested in seeing a contemporary dance project, and you end up seeing, multimedia electronic music composition that excites you, and it's a process of discovery and maybe finding points of intersection between these kinds of explorations of people coming from different disciplines in the performing arts, but moving towards edges and ideas and new territory.
And why is it important, do you think, for REDCAT to do this?
Why is it important for REDCAT? Well, I think we have a very particular mission within Los Angeles. There are other spaces who present these artists' work, but with a focus on our main season of national and international projects, as well as Los Angeles-based projects that are in the mix of the sort of more finished, more tested, even though they're still usually pretty experimental. This is important because that's where these artists grow and come from. I don't think that there's a future if we can't support these artists as they're making new work. And there can be a lot of wait and see in the rest of the field. Like, well, we'll wait and see if the project is great, and then we'll decide if we want to get on board. And that doesn't give people the opportunity to get there. And I think there's a lot less infrastructure in Los Angeles, I think, especially within dance and experimental theater and music, like the things that we kind of focus on within the festival. Artists are usually self-producing. They're taking on the responsibility of marketing themselves and renting a space and finding people to collaborate on the technical aspects of things. And so we do our best to provide as much of that as works for them, that engages with their process in a way that makes sense. Some of these artists have technical collaborators, so we don't offer that. But where they don't, we try to bring in support. And that way they can focus on making their work. And I think that's really important, so that the artists aren't completely distracted by the really practical elements of producing the work, and can focus on making the work.
And let's focus on this festival, this year. What's been the most surprising or really exciting performance you've seen from the proposal now to, we're in week 2, so you've seen at least parts of most of them.
Most things, but the most surprising thing can sometimes be what happens from Monday to Thursday.
Yeah.
It really can be. I think that it's always a bit of a ride, and being a part of a creative process with an artist. And I don't know that I would single anyone out. I don't think that that's true, because everyone works in their own way, and these sort of surprises and moments come at different points in their process. But the exciting part, and always the surprising part, is seeing it really come together at the end. So where did they arrive? And that is always really interesting, because you've kind of followed them from their inception. And I'm not in rehearsal all the time. I mean, this is they're making the work. We're not. I'm not a director of the work. I oversee the festival, so it really comes back to me, to creating that space and that laboratory to provide them the room to do that. But sort of over that journey and over the conversations and over the realizations and the growth of ideas and expansion of ideas, we have a pretty amazing technical infrastructure, and there really tends to be a lot of growth in ambition, in what I hope is a good way. That when they see what resources are available to them, watching the artists kind of expand their vision is always really exciting.
And I got to see it week 1. I got to see week 1 on Saturday night, which was just wonderful, having interviewed them Wednesday when everybody was like, I'm in dress rehearsal, what's going on? Surprisingly, poor dog who had teched and then dressed were the most calm, probably out of necessity. But it was kind of astonishing to me, the thought that there were people in the audience who maybe came to see one group and then were seeing this crazy, diverse, really kind of momentum of story and form through the evening. So does that ever affect that idea ever affect how you program a night?
Yeah, as much as possible. I mean, I'm talking a lot about the artists, but I really hope it's a great experience for the audiences as well, and give that thought, knowing that these are new works and they're things I can't always predict, and there can be really interesting and surprising connections that start to happen. I mean, I try to give shape to a program where I think that the people who come might be surprised and yet engaged with the other works on the program. We want to create an environment of support and interest combined, and so yeah, we do our best in that regard. I do my best in that regard. And yeah, so the weeks have slightly different tones, I think you'll see, sometimes different emphasis, but with enough space where even I can get surprised by, like, last week seeing the use of two different kinds of wash basins and different works that
Right.
started to resonate across these like completely different approaches, but sort of start to anchor themselves or be in dialogue, so you can look at how these different artists approach the use of those materials, how they approach their like forms. So I hope that doesn't sound too abstract. I also think, like, from an audience experience, it should be a good time if you're an adventurous person, or not even that adventurous, really just interested in somewhat experimental work or exploration. Then you'll get some things, hopefully, out of each of the pieces that further inform how you think about work, the way work is getting created now in this particular place, in this particular time.
And I'm always just impressed, because usually from the purely theater world, you have what's essentially a one-act festival. This is different, but sometimes I feel like the more successful festivals are the ones that don't have to encourage people just to come for their friends. You know, so it was, I guess, the fact that everybody stayed, from what I could tell, was amazing. And with that idea, because that wash basin was really fascinating as well, over to... have you seen, since you read so many proposals for this and for the studio series, do you see recurring themes or stories that pop up either year to year or...
That's a tricky question, because it means recalling a lot. and it can shift and vary, because these are processes in time, because we're working with a time-based form. When people are making things, how they're responding to the, contemporary moment. We can go through shifts. So in terms of a large arc, I think it's kind of hard to say. But I think that, and I'll refer, since you, as a point of reference, to the first week of the festival, that I saw in that, and I saw in the proposals, this very interesting attempt to examine sort of our contemporary moment through these different historical lenses. And really kind of also, like, across boundaries. We're talking about issues of feminism, gender, sexuality, race, all existed within those works, but very different from, I think, the work of the 90s, which is very much about the individual voice. I think you saw these things working across time. The Poor Dog went back to 1938 to Jelly Roll Morton.
That song made me insane. In a
good
way.
and exploring female madness and racialized perceptions of sexuality and things that, but things that still very relevant, but through that kind of obscure lens or maybe complicated lens. In each of those pieces, I saw some of that going on. Susan Simpson's piece, returning to the 50s, to a shift in consciousness that led to much of what the gay movement was based on, as well as architecture, and which is a beautiful intersection of just shifting sense of perceptions, and what was it about that moment that caused people to imagine new forms and new ideologies. And there's I think a really nice reach. So some of that I think reflects how we consider identity now, or how we reflect upon identity through increasing sort of layers. And also, I do see an historical interest that reflects a really question about what the future is. I think that this is always true. No one knows the future. I don't know the future. I make this program. I don't know the future. It's new work. New work. But I see it actually not just in Los Angeles in some works. It's sort of returning to these seminal points in sort of creative moments because I think we're trying to find a way to articulate this next stage of like what I think is America's cycle of reimagining itself and its own potential.
Mm-hmm.
So there's one thing. I couldn't apply that. I couldn't apply that across the board to all of these works. That would be unfair. But there's that. And I think that's very interesting to me. And obviously, a lot of interest in what it means to be present in a space. Mm. Because here we are. Hi everybody. There's a radical shift in our culture that's coming from all the potential to interact without being physically present. And theater continues to be about that physical relationship to an artist within a shared space, within a shared space within the audience. And people are really, I think, grappling with that. How do you take hold? What does it mean to be present? I see that in some of these works. Even Jinku's work, which is all digital, is trying to deal with a physical presence. His work, for those of you who haven't read, sort of responds to physical structures with projection and builds electronic scores around his response to those structures. So it has trying to get to some kind of materiality, even when it's purely digital and there's no person on stage. I think those questions are kind of out there right now.
And have you seen someone from the Nows Festival take that work elsewhere?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the really rewarding things, and that's where I come back to this research and development. Not every project goes on to become a big touring project, but there are quite a few that have happened now over the span of the festival. It's why I think it's really important if you look at a sort of 10-year arc, and I hope we could do a good job of naming them, but Rosanna Gampson developed a 20-minute piece called Tove that later became a full evening that toured nationally some and is going to Poland this fall and has continued its life. Sheetal Gandhi, who with North Indian percussion and vocal traditions, solo theater project that toured extensively. Christina Wong, her Cat Lady piece, toured a bunch, and actually both her Cat Lady and her
Going Green the Wrong Way?
Not Going Green the Wrong Way, before that, Wong Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Oh.
Some of that material was developed out. It was wasn't, I wouldn't say a direct link, but some of that material evolved into that piece that keeps going. Lars Jan and his early morning opera, a piece called Abacus, that then had a residency at NPAC, a really great colleague organization that supports the development of work using new technologies, and then performed it at Sundance. I mean, I can keep going. It's pretty great, I think, and maybe Cloud Eye Control, another great LA-based media and performance-based company. So, yes, that's what I really aspire to.
And where do you post about these? I know where I find out about them, but how can people interested hear about them?
Well, sign up for our email list. That's really because we send one out every week. I swear it's not too much. You can. It's necessary because we do so much that it's like every week can be very different throughout the year, and we share a lot that way. Of course, the standard platforms: Twitter, Facebook. Join us, follow us, like us. Those are our primary social media tools. And then there's another layer that's going on, of course, in terms of just general marketing, but also I think within the artist community, artist to artist, talking about things, sharing information about what they're doing, me, colleague to colleague, that I think is a very important part of this role. This festival allows me to develop relationships with artists on a trajectory and help bring them to attention of other people I think might be interested in their work. So that's not just the audience, but then there's the there's the it's not any less true now, or it's not any more true now that these networks of communication are how pretty much everything functions. That's
right.
really general, but
I know, but
I'll try to break it down.
Even 2 years ago when you had to strong arm some people to a Facebook page, it's totally different. And one last question. What is your favorite part about your job?
Oh.
Right now.
Right now?
In this
my
moment.
favorite part of the job? And experiencing their work. I feel it's such an important and undervalued and undersupported part of our culture, or cultures around everywhere, that is so important to our ability to adapt to the world that's changing around us. I feel like the artists are providing this incredible service, reflecting things back to us that help us process these shifts and calling our attention to things that deserve attention and reflection, and to be continually encouraged to do that, I think, is something that, not just professionally, but in terms of my own life, enhances it beyond measure.
Thank you, and thank you very much for this brainchild of yours.
Oh.
It's a wonderful way to, like you said, just see kind of the diaspora and amazing emerging artists. So, thank you.
Thank you for your time, and thank you all for listening.